אבותינו, אלוהי אברהם, אלוהי יצחק, ואלוהי יעקב, אלוהי שרה, אלוהי רבקה, אלוהי רחל ואלוהי לאה, האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון, גומל חסדים טובים, וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות באמהות, ומביא גאול לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה. מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם בעזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיים איתימתה, רב להושיע, מוריד הטל, מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיים מתים ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה החיות מתים, ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי המתים.
Please be seated and take a few moments for silent prayer, either personal reflections or prayers of your heart or the prayers on the page. For our Hoda'ah prayer, our prayer of thanksgiving, a poet by the Zionist poet Rachel, to my country. I have not sung you, my country, not brought glory to your name with the great deeds of a hero or the spoils a battle yields. But on the shores of the Jordan, my hands have planted a tree, and my feet have made a pathway through your fields. Modest are the gifts I bring you. I know this, mother. Modest, I know, the offerings of your daughter. Only an outburst of song on a day when the light flares up. Only a silent tear for your poverty. Baruch atah Adonai hatov shimcha ulecha ne'eh lehodot. Blessed are you, Adonai. Your name is goodness, and you are worthy of thanksgiving. And on our back page, our prayer, for our prayer of peace, Shalom Rav, from the contemporary poet Ada Aharoni, I want to kill you, war. I want to kill you, war, forever, not like a phoenix that always comes back. I want to kill you, war, and I don't know how and I don't know why all the people of the world don't join hands to kill you, war. You, the greatest murderer of them all. They just know how to kill the one or the two or the hundreds and the thousands, but not you, you the greatest killer of them all. So we will kill you, war, before you kill us. This is the real deterrent strategy, not the useless liar one we're so busy with. All the peace marchers of the world will take the heavy metal cases full of nuclear wastes and dump them over war's head. The cases will leak as usual. And war will dissolve back into his archaic bottle where he belongs. We shut the cork. Baruch atah Adonai hamvarech et amo Yisrael b'shalom. Praise are you, Adonai, who blesses your people with peace.
Shalom Rav, Yisrael Rav, Tassim Leolam.
This week of Israeli Independence Day, one more poem from the great pantheon of women who are poets of Israel. This is a song by Naomi Shemer that can be found on page 347. Al Kol Ele, my good God, keep thee safe, the honey and the sting, the bitter and the sweet, and our baby daughter, the burning flame, the pure water, and the man returning home from afar.
Please join us. Al hadvash ve'al ha'oketz, al hamar ve'hamatok, al biteinu hatinoket, shmorei li hatov, al ha'esh ha'mevoeret, al hamayim hazakim, al ha'ish hashav habayta min hamerhakim, al kol ele, al kol ele, shmor li hatov, al hadvash ve'al ha'oketz, al hamar ve'hamatok, al natakot natuah, al tishkach et hatiyah, al shivreini ve'ashuva el haaretz hatova.
We now take time in our service to think of our loved ones who are in need of healing. Refuat hanefesh, refuat haguf, a healing of spirit, a healing of body. As we think of our loved ones, we turn to page 253 in the middle for our prayer for healing, Misha Berach.
and let us say, Amen. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say,
It's my privilege and honor to introduce our guest speaker this evening. Dr. David Ellenson, president of the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion and I.H. and Anna Gressel Professor of Jewish Religious Thought, is a distinguished rabbi, scholar, and leader of the Reform movement. He is internationally recognized for his publications and research in the areas of Jewish religious thought, ethics, and modern Jewish history. He received his PhD from Columbia University in 1981 and was ordained by HUC-JIR in 1977. He has been a fellow at the Shalom Hartman Institute of Jerusalem, a fellow and lecturer at the Institute of Advanced Studies, as well as a Lady Davis Visiting Professor of the Humanities in the Department of Jewish Thought at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and has been a visiting professor at both UCLA and the Jewish Theological Seminary of America. Rabbi Ellenson's extensive publications include After Emancipation, Jewish Religious Responses to Modernity, which won the Jewish National Book Council's award as the Outstanding Book in Jewish Thought in 2005. His work, Pledges of Jewish Allegiance, Conversion, Law, and Policy Making in 19th and 20th Century Orthodox Responsa, co-authored with Daniel Gordis, was published by Stanford University Press in January of 2012. In 1979, or maybe 1980, long before the cantorate was a possibility for my life, Rabbi Ellenson began teaching as a faculty member at HUC in Los Angeles. 2 years before I began my own journey towards the rabbinate, Rabbi Ellenson was installed as the president of the College Institute in 2002. In 1989, when I began my cantorial studies in Jerusalem, I had the privilege to sit in on one of Rabbi Ellenson's lectures. In later years, I led various services at the college with him and studied with him at many conferences and in Jerusalem, a journey of growth and learning for over 20 years. He is a teacher's teacher and a rabbi's rabbi. What you may not know about him is that from the core of his soul, he is not only a scholar, teacher, and world religious leader, he is the rabbi who mentors his faculty, who takes genuine interest in all of the students, whether they are rabbinic, cantorial, educational, Jewish communal workers. He comforts and aids his student in very poignant ways. In times of joy and sorrows, he is the one to whom his entire board of overseers turn for rabbinic guidance. Whether at a national convention or on the campus of the Hebrew Union College in Jerusalem, New York, Cincinnati, or Los Angeles, Rabbi Ellenson is never alone. He is surrounded by faculty and students wanting to share their studies, thoughts, and lives with him. This was also the experience of Rabbi Satz and his wife, Rabbi Elster, when they were ordained by Rabbi Ellenson on the HUC Cincinnati campus in 2007. Almost 1 year ago was my privilege to receive my smicha, my rabbinic ordination, from Rabbi Ellenson. His passion for the Jewish people as teacher and scholar is evidenced by the way he lives his life when the public eye is not upon him. My favorite moments, and there have been a few that I can remember distinctly, have been at the times when I encountered Dr. Ellenson in the airports of New York, Chicago, and Tel Aviv. Even while racing to catch a plane, Rabbi Ellenson always stopped for a moment to say hello and inquired after my welfare, all the while cradling in his arms a volume of Talmud. Ever the student, ever the teacher, ever a person who I am honored to call Rabbi Umori, my rabbi, my teacher, and my friend, Rabbi David Ellenson.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Shabbat Shalom. It's hard to know how to continue after this. Is this? Bring it closer. Okay. Can everybody hear? I am very moved to be here tonight. I lived in California from 1979 until 2002, when I assumed my position as president of the college. And of course, I also speak as the father of 5 children. And I suspect many of you have had these kinds of experiences when we have discussions with our children. And occasionally they will ask, well, why are you doing this for this child and not for me? I have learned that, and my wife has as well, that there really is no good answer to give. As soon as we try to explain why we think the circumstances merit a certain behavior in regard to one child or a certain kind of support as opposed to another, all of our children are, of course, very, very clever, and we are never able to provide sufficient reasons to persuade the one who is the plaintiff at a given moment as to why we have decided in regard to one in this way and another one in the other way. And of course, we have finally learned to say, well, we just love your sister or brother better than we love you. They don't usually like that answer, but it does stop the conversation at that point. I say this because after hearing Arlene's introduction and being mindful that I have ordinees here from Cincinnati and all the campuses, I will say I love all the campuses of the Hebrew Union College: Jerusalem, New York, Cincinnati, and Los Angeles. But I will have to confess that my heart still belongs in Los Angeles and in California and in this community of San Diego, where I've had the opportunity to teach both in this synagogue and others through the Wexner Foundation. And what can I say? I miss Old Town and all sorts of other San Diego sites. It is really a great pleasure to be here with you. There are many people that I would or could recognize at this moment. But before I begin, let me say a couple of words about one woman who is here, Agnes Herman. I am really very, very touched that you are here tonight. If you all can take a look at her, raise your hand for one moment. She's 90 years young. I want to tell everyone here, her husband, Rabbi Herman, was director of the, Pacific Southwest Council, more for the Union for Reform Judaism, and she and her husband were mentors both to me and to my wife Jackie when we were here in Los Angeles and in California in the 70s. And it is really a great, great pleasure, and I feel extremely honored that you came out tonight to be at the synagogue to hear my words. So Baruch haba, welcome, and I would recognize you here at this moment. What I had wanted to speak about tonight, and Rabbi Burke had invited me to speak about, was the topic of where is Reform Judaism today and what are the directions in which we are likely to go in the years ahead. I love to speak, particularly on futurology. One of the things I like about it is, first, I would remind you that the Talmud says that those who would predict the future after the destruction of the temple, prophecy is reserved for fools. The future has a way of surprising us in all sorts of ways, but one of the reasons why I like talking about the future is I really can't be empirically disconfirmed, or at least I can't at the moment I speak about what the future will be. It represents my best sort of hypothesis as to what the future will be, and I'll be long gone after you're able to disconfirm whatever it is that I've said the future will bring. But I do think about these topics a great deal in light of the role that we play at the Hebrew Union College in attempting to educate a new generation of leadership who will guide the synagogues of this movement and the directions of this movement. This is a challenging and exciting time. I believe all of you know that we have a new leader of our movement, Rabbi Richard Jacobs, who has just assumed the position of President of the Union for Reform Judaism, and I am confident that under his leadership that our movement will flourish and be able to speak to the congregational and communal needs of our people as we move into the 21st century. It would be difficult to find an individual who is more visionary, harder working, creative, and learned than Rabbi Jacobs, and all of us in this movement are certainly blessed that he has assumed this post as President of the Union for Reform Judaism. I only smile because he was an extremely, extremely successful pulpit rabbi in a congregation that was flourishing. And while, of course, there were challenges, I suspect being President of the Union for Reform Judaism represents a rather greater challenge than being the senior rabbi of Westchester Reformed Temple, his former position. And I know from my discussions with him, there are days where perhaps he wonders why he moved from one post to the other, but that's no different than my saying, I remember what it was to be a professor and not president of a college institute. But in terms of talking about the reform movement tonight, what I would like to do would be to try to place the challenges that we confront as we look towards the future in a larger American context, a context of American religiosity, and then attempt to talk about what I think some of the directions will be, but then ultimately try to deliver what I think is a religious message about what the mission and aim of our movement genuinely is. In order to understand where Reform Judaism is and many of the problems that confront us, one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that, as is true of virtually any specific religious group or any individual, we think about these issues principally from where we ourselves are. But it is important to try to place this in a larger context and to understand the role of religion in America in general and the issues of community that we confront in America if we are going to understand precisely where we in the reform movement stand today and where we are likely to be as we move into the future. And in order to do this, I'd like to talk about two books written by a scholar named Peter Berger. Berger served for many years as a professor at Boston University and was arguably the leading sociologist of religion in all of North America, if not the entire world, a very prolific author. But I would mention two of his books tonight in order to frame our consideration and discussion as you celebrate your 150th anniversary and reflect upon the past of this congregation and focus on what your future will be. The two books, one is entitled The Heretical Imperative, and the other book that I would mention is called The Homeless Mind. Berger is not writing specifically about Judaism. In fact, he's not writing about Judaism virtually at all. He himself is a Lutheran. He is writing about religion in America. But the theses in these books that are contained in the titles, The Heretical Imperative and The Homeless Mind, help me, and I think us, hopefully, reflect on where we are and where we are likely to go. The heretical imperative has the following thesis at its heart. Berger points out that the word heresy has as its Greek etymological root the word horesis. Horesis means choice or option. The nature of the modern world as Berger sees it, the world we inhabit in North America and that perhaps is present virtually everywhere in a global economy like the one in which we live, is that heresy or choice is an imperative. It is absolutely unavoidable. In a world where people tweet and engage in discussion and communication with each other virtually instantaneously, the nature of the world we live in is a pluralistic world. I will confess I'm 64 years old. I did mention tweet, and I think all my children engage in it. I am myself not a tweeter. In fact, I don't really know what tweeting is, except that you can't use more than 140 characters, but I'm not on Facebook either, I have to confess, though I did like the movie very much. But I know about these things, even if I, in quotes, don't know about them. One of my best stories is with one of our daughters once. This was about 4 years ago. She's in her early 20s now. She was, and maybe this is passé already, I'm not sure. I'd have to ask some of the younger people. She was instant messaging with about 8 friends at once, but she was also on the phone with about 4 of them. And I asked her, well, if you're instant messaging, because I gather that's communicating in live time. I myself have never instant messaged, but I know all my children do. Why are you also on the telephone with 4 of those people? And she responded to me only in the exasperated way that a teenager can respond to one's parent. She said, well, you know, Abba, Daddy, she said, sometimes you can wait 10 seconds to communicate, but sometimes you have to say it right away. And I thought, well, she lives in a kind of different world than I live in. But it's reflective of exactly what Berger's talking about. The nature of the world we live in is one where heresy, choice, option is an imperative, and people have multiple, thousands, as it were, of social and cultural worlds that are before them. To illustrate, I think, precisely what Berger meant, I can look at my own life. When I was a boy, I grew up in a small, then, southern town, Newport News, Virginia. My father had 5 brothers and sisters. Every one of my uncles and aunts lived on the same street, Oak Avenue in Newport News, Virginia. I had 13 first cousins. We were together incessantly. Indeed, at every holiday and every other kind of an occasion. When I was a boy, I did grow up in an Orthodox background, an Orthodox synagogue. I had an Orthodox Jewish education. My father, had I said I wanted to become a rabbi, would have said, I hope David goes to Yeshiva University. If I had said to my father, well, I'm going to go to Hebrew Union College, which I did say eventually, he would say, and in fact he did say, I wish you wouldn't do that. He didn't say it in quite those words. But if you had said to him in the 1950s